This is CNN Breaking News.
We are following breaking news. The judge in former President Donald Trump's hush money case has postponed sentencing until after the November election.
This is a big win for Trump and his legal team, who would argue that sentencing the former president during the campaign would amount to election interference. With us now, CNN's Kara Scannell, CNN Chief Legal Affairs Correspondent Paula Reed, CNN Political Director David Chalian, CNN Legal Analyst Jennifer Rogers, CNN Senior Political Analyst Ron Brownstein. A full house of CNN folks. Thanks so much for all of you being with us. Kara, first to you, how did Judge Merchan explain this decision to delay sentencing until November 26th?
Judge Merchan issued a 4-page decision here, and he goes to great lengths to explain his reasoning behind it, saying that he's doing this in part to avoid any appearance that he is trying to influence the election to affect one party or the other. Now, he also notes in this decision that the prosecutors did not oppose delaying the sentencing, and he said some of their arguments in their papers actually led him to think that they agreed with delaying the sentencing. So he says specifically he's doing this to avoid any appearance, however unwarranted, that the proceeding has been affected by or seeks to affect the approaching presidential election. He also says he doesn't want to give an advantage or a disadvantage to either political party, so taking the politics out of this. Now, he also is saying that this was a verdict that a jury returned after hearing evidence in this case over 11 weeks, that their verdict stands to be treated independently of politics, and that Donald Trump himself, as the defendant, stands to have a hearing, a sentencing hearing, that is devoid of politics as well. So the judge pushing this now until after the election. In this, he's also saying that he is not going to rule on the question of presidential immunity. Trump's lawyers have asked to have this conviction thrown out. They said that the indictment itself should be thrown out because the case should never have been brought, they argue, because of the Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity. Specifically, in this case, saying that certain evidence should not have gone before the jury, including testimony from Trump's former White House aide Hope Hicks, as well as tweets that Trump made while he was president. That decision was expected to come on September 16th. The judge now saying he will not issue that decision until after the election as well. Trump's lawyers have said that if they lose that, they're going to appeal it, and they will likely also seek to continue to delay the sentencing. So while it is currently set for after the election in the end of November, it's possible we could see some more legal efforts to try to move it. They very aggressively have tried different avenues here to move this sentencing, and successful today with the judge saying that he agreed with Trump's team. He read the prosecution's memo as saying that they agreed with it and that he thought it would only be fair to avoid any appearance of having any politics influence the sentencing or having him influence the election. He was moving this sentencing until November 26th. Boris, Brianna?
All right, Kara, stay with us. And Paula, what was your big takeaway from the decision, and how is the Trump camp responding?
We'll hear Judge Juan Merchan for the first time really acknowledging the historic nature of this situation. Let's just state the obvious. No judge in the history of this country has ever been in a position of sentencing a former president while that individual is running for the White House. So it's the first time he's really said, yes, we are in a unique situation. On top of that, he also has to figure out how this unprecedented Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity that was issued back in July, how that applies in this case. No judge has ever been here. I mean, he even acknowledges, he says, quote, this matter is one that stands alone in a unique place in this nation's history. And he kind of nods to the fact that it's always been a unique case, but this is the first time that its historical nature seems to have impacted his decision making. Because I'll be honest, I wasn't sure which way he was going to go. It seemed based on the law, he should probably delay it. Trump has a right. He's unlikely to succeed, but he does have a right to litigate these issues the Supreme Court has raised. But historically, Juan Merchan has not budged on any arguments related to the election. The Trump team is, of course, excited. This is a big win for the legal team, but we're in a political season, as David knows, and so they're trying to put a political frame on it, saying, quote, there should be no sentencing in the Manhattan DA's election interference witch hunt, as mandated by the United States Supreme Court. This case, along with all the other Harris-Biden hoaxes, should be dismissed. I will note that in this case, Trump was convicted by a jury of his peers. It had nothing to do with President Biden or Kamala Harris, but they're trying to frame him as a political martyr.
Jennifer, to you, it strikes me that here Judge Merchan specifically references the potential for reputational harm ahead of the election. And yesterday, Judge Tanya Chutkan, effectively in her courtroom in the election subversion case, the federal one, said that the election doesn't matter. What do you make of that distinction between the two decisions?
Well, it's interesting, Boris, because you're right. They did take different tacks. Now, there is a difference, of course. We're talking about a sentencing, potentially saying that Trump should go to prison in this case, whereas Judge Chutkan instead is going to take briefing on the papers. We're not talking about a hearing, a trial, a sentencing. So they're differently situated. The other thing is that Marshawn, may actually get more clarity by the time the election has happened as to what his real options are. I mean, we all know that if Trump wins this election, he is not going to prison for this, at least not in the next 4 years. So that will give Marshawn some clarity. So there's that reason to do it too. But most of all, I have to say, and it's kind of, Monday morning quarterbacking, but when you think of instances where the defendant wants something and the prosecutors don't object, 99 times out of 100, the judge is going to go with that because the parties are more or less on the same page. And that's what he did here. So we probably all should have seen this coming, really, as soon as DA Bragg and his team decided not to oppose and to leave it in the hands of the judge.
Yeah, and Ron, the Trump team is welcoming this news, obviously, and they, even as he really capitalizes politically on whatever legal developments come his way, clearly they wanted to punt this one beyond the election. What do you think about the kind of effect that it could have had that they may have been worried about?
Yeah, look, it's funny because the judge said he didn't want to influence the election, but obviously not sentencing before the election is a way of influencing the election. I feel like we're pretty much dug in on these questions already, though. I'm not sure that the sentencing would have moved many more voters than those who already think that Trump is unsuited to be president again, in part because of all of his legal trouble. Certainly, Vice President Harris has shut down that avenue, in her rallies when people say lock him up. And she says, we'll let the courts deal with that. We will deal with November. I am struck that, in the way she talks about Trump's legal troubles and legal situation, she focuses more on the future than the past, less on that what he has done has disqualified him than on the argument that the Supreme Court decision on immunity essentially will unleash him in a second term to challenge civil liberties and violate norms and constitutional standards even more aggressively than he did as president. So on balance, certainly a win for him in the sense that you don't have the uncertainty of how the public might have reacted. But I do think that by and large, the people who are rejecting Trump because of his legal troubles have already done so.
David, we got reporting from CNN's Caitlin Collins soon after this decision came down that Trump was with his legal team when it was announced and that he was pleased. But earlier in the day, during the press briefing, there was a bit of an uncomfortable moment with his lawyer standing behind him, Trump saying, quote, "I'm disappointed in my legal talent. I'll be honest with you." What did you make of that?
Well, that is not new for Donald Trump to be complaining about his lawyers in their presence. That is something that if you sign up to be a Donald Trump lawyer, you could pretty much expect that will happen. I do very much agree with Ron's assessment of the political impact of this. I think it's remarkably limited at this point, which is just an astonishing thing to say when you think about all the history that Paula walked us through. I mean, 34 times over convicted criminal, whatever you think of the merits of the case, that's the reality of what a jury of his peers did. And yet we've seen almost no movement in his poll numbers. The sum total of the political effect of Donald Trump's legal woes in this 2024 election cycle has been to help him secure that Republican nomination more rapidly than perhaps he even expected and dispense with his Republican competition. That is the actual biggest political impact that we've seen of these court rulings over the last couple of years.
What are you thinking, David, as you look to the future, which will bring one of two possibilities, that Donald Trump wins or he loses, and that in these very big federal cases, you would expect his attorney general just dispenses with them, but he obviously would still have, for instance, this sentencing that would probably be punted. But if he loses, then he has a lot to contend with, and that is obviously the opposition candidate. I mean, how do you see this playing out?
Well, as you said, I mean, it plays out totally differently depending on the outcome of the election. I think your prediction that he would have his attorney general do away with the special counsel investigations, I think that's a safe bet, and I'm not big on predictions, but you can take that to the bank. I do think it is a question for Kamala Harris and how she perceives, if she were to win, if she thinks there's some role for her Justice Department in trying to bring the country together and beyond these Trump trials, or allow them to just play out, as she has said, that these will all just play out in the courts, or if she sees some role as a potential winner of the election to actually try and move the country beyond this moment of these